Hey, what's happening, everybody? I am your host, Walter Waddell, and this show is the Super Show, but it's the CFB version, the variation that you haven't seen for quite some time. Shoot, it's been, I don't know, like 7, 8 months since we've talked college football. I'm super jazzed to be jumping into it and talking it up. We're, of course, brought to you by and streaming live and on demand from the world famous FTN Network, doing it big. If you don't know who I am, again, my name is Walt Waddell at Dubdeuce85 on all social media platforms. And what we do here, typically on a week-to-week basis when the season's going on, is we break down DFS slates, DraftKings, FanDuel. We talk about sports betting, any props, prize picks, the actual sports books. We break all of that down for you from a week-to-week basis, starting with week 0 all the way on to the bowl series, the championships, all of that stuff, the extended playoff. There's just going to be so much goodness. And what I've been doing the past 2 months since the CBB season ended was going over the transfer portal, coaching changes, previews of each and every relevant conference, and getting you ready and having your mind set for college basketball so that when it comes, it's only 120-ish days. When it happens, you'll be able to go back and watch those shows. Hey, who's Kentucky got? Hey, what's Washington? What's the Pac-12? And some of the info is going to be a little bit different. It won't be outdated. There'll be some changes, some late additions, but for the most part, the nuts and bolts in each of those shows. So you can go back and watch on my playlist here on the FTN Network, the Super Show, and go back and watch all of those shows. And we've been doing that for the past 2 months. But now that we're heading into the end of June, 4th of July is right around the corner. Happy birthday, America! And we're going to be into week 0 before you know it. The month of July and into August is going to happen so very fast. You won't know what hit you. Week 0 begins on August 26th. So we're a little under 2 months away. I think there's 10 games scheduled for week 0. Notre Dame is going to be facing off with, I believe, Navy. USC is going to be playing San Jose State. There's some interesting games, of course. Week 0, there tends to be blowouts and everything. But, it's literally going to be here before you know it. And there are some great matchups in week 1 and beyond. And we're going to work our way through. What we're going to do is we're going to break down each conference and really talk about relevant players, who to know, a little bit about changes, things like that, and really get you prepared for that. And then as we get into, the month of August, in the middle of August, we'll start talking about more, fantasy draft. I'm going to have some CFB fantasy leagues this year, season-long style, dynasty, and all that. So you guys want to get involved in that, you definitely can. And also, of course, we'll be breaking down the slates early as soon as they break. As soon as they come out, we'll be doing that as well. I expect a huge amount of contests, a lot of money to be made. There's just so much. And one of the shows is going to be very bet-centric as well. I'm going to be able to actually, probably a week or two before week 0, give you my predictions for each conference winner, any bets, stuff like that, and kind of what DK is offering, what I'm finding out there, and what we're going to be able to bet and make money on together. We are doing it. College football. I am so I'm, those of you that followed me, I've been doing this, the show thing since 2013, 2012. I followed college basketball my entire life, of course, college football, but most people know me as the CBB, guy. I live, breathe, sleep, eat basketball, but I really love college football too. And it's right up on par with CBB for me. And as much as I love the daily grind of CBB, I love it. There is nothing like Saturday morning, getting up, talking to the boys and the girls in the Discord, game planning, doing the Saturday morning show, talking about injury stuff, any last minute updates and just, in the Discord, grinding, tilting, sweating touchdowns. We've got our low owned, in basketball, it's the posh play of the day. We got our low owned receiver. It's typically a cheap receiver because you guys know me and Jake will be doing shows with me this year too, I think. we spend money. We pay up at quarterback typically. We spend up at running back. We're big running back. I'm a 4 running back guy. It works, folks. I know that a lot of people are still hesitant but for 2 years, we got 2 years of data now with 4 running backs works, and especially when a slate's chock full of amazing running back options. And some of those running backs can score 35, 40 points. You got QBs here scoring 20, 25. And I get it. The QB has the ball. They're going to be, in a position. It's the right move. It's the right play. The book says this. The experts say this. You know what? I got my own way of doing things. I'm a very leverage-oriented player, which I'm very clear with you guys about. And we've made some good money together. We've had fun together. We've lost money together. But at the end of the day, you guys know I'm always going to stick with my plays, line in the sand, right or wrong. I'm always going to, live or die with those plays. So the 4 running back thing is just one of those things. But nothing like waking up Saturday morning and grinding CFB with you guys and tilting it. So I'm looking forward to that. And, of course, the schedule for this season should be the same. Right now I'm doing the Wednesday previews, but as we get closer to the season, I will switch, as long as the powers that be allow, back to the Thursday. So we'll be looking at that Thursday night show, which will typically be myself and my man Jake. If he can't make it, we'll have other special guests throughout the season to help us out. But that'll be what we use to cover the Saturday main slates. We'll be talking about both FanDuel and DraftKings, of course, Prize Picks, betting, that thing. And then Saturday morning, get up nice and early with me on the West Coast, where I give any, core changes, injury news. There's typically something we're breaking. We're very in tune. College football season is a chance for me to get into message boards and really, dive into and look for rumors and news. And over the years, we've broken, a lot of different news throughout and relevant news, especially closing into lock and whatnot. So I always say the content is great. When you get with FTN, you have access to all our tools. But our Discord, man, has made so much money for people, and not just the niche sports, Discord, NBA, NFL, all that. There's just so much strategy talk, so much breaking news that I might not have time to post on Twitter. I might not have time to put it somewhere else for free. But in the Discord, it's a guarantee. Any breaking news will be put in the Discord with enough time for you guys to make those changes. And typically, I'm putting that stuff in there before I make changes to my own lineups. Like, I make sure you guys are taken care of before I'm taken care of, just so that everybody knows what's going on. Not being selfish. I want to see you guys win as much money. Just myself, I love winning. Obviously, who doesn't? But I really get a lot of joy out of seeing the community at FTN win money. Not only my counterparts and my peers, but also our subscribers, also the people who, follow us and take what we say to heart. And there's not a lot of people who can say that, a lot of providers who can say that, but I'm very confident that the people at FTN can say that, and they're excited, and we show that with our Discord love. And there's always somebody in those Discord channels. So you want to make sure you get over to FTN Daily or FTN Bets and plan to sign up. There's going to be some sort of pack. Don't hold me to this, but there was last year. You signed up for NFL, you got the CFB package. So I'm sure that there'll be something going on. We'll have my code going on. We'll have all kinds of stuff. And if you're not a member already, it's definitely time to get involved with FTN. We have so much stuff going on. We're really, really planning that flight to the moon, I'm telling you right now, or Mars, Jupiter, Neptune. But there's so much crazy stuff going on at FTN, and I'm happy to be a part of it. You definitely don't want to miss out this year by not being with us. All right, so the first CFB show of the season. Man, it's crazy. It's crazy that this is happening. It's already time to get college football going. My birthday is August 2nd, so I know once we hit into July and get forth, it just goes so fast from there. And before you know it, we're going to be talking about, hey, college basketball starts in 5 days. Hey, it's March Madness. Hey, we're preparing for next season. So let's enjoy it. Let's dive in. This first show is going to be a preview of a conference I'm quite familiar with, being a West Coast guy myself, the Pac-12. Lots of upcoming changes with the Pac-12, of course, with teams coming and going. This will be the final year for teams such as USC, to be in the Pac-12 here. There'll be some other changes. There's talk of San Diego State joining the Pac-12. There's a lot going on, but this current iteration of the Pac-12 will be the final season as it currently stands right now. Lots going on. Now, the Pac-12 is going to need to get some respect from people this year. The SEC, of course, ACC, Big Ten, people are always talking about those conferences. Very similar to college basketball in that regard. And the Pac-12 has some teams who are definitely going to struggle to win games this year. But if you're watching this, it's more than likely you're watching it less for a team winning games and more for who on that team can provide me with the most value. Value being making me money in DFS, making me money in the prop betting market, and making me money on prize picks, betting, whatever it is, maybe your season long, your dynasty. And I got to tell you, these teams like Cal, Arizona State, Stanford, like these are teams that are probably not going to win very many games. And there might be some betting opportunities for us to bet the unders, depending on what those are when it's all said and done. But I've gone through here and highlighted for each, players that are going to be relevant for DFS purposes. And a lot of those bottom feeder, quote unquote, bottom feeder teams got some new coaches in there, whether that's a new head coach or a new offensive coordinator and somebody who is going to kind of reinvigorate these offenses. And there's going to be quite a bit of high-flying video game-esque type of offenses in the Pac-12, more so than what you're used to. It's not just going to be USC and my Washington Huskies scoring points in this league. It's going to be some of the other teams, such as Cal, Stanford, Arizona State, some of these teams that, might make you a little bit surprised to hear that. So this is going to be a conference with lots of fantasy goodness. We'll start there. Let's dive in here. We'll go team by team, kind of talk about, maybe projected depth charts on some of them and any other, useful information here. And I do want to start with the Cal Bears. Their offense, it's funny because it was stagnant. They didn't win games. There was a team we could pick on, but they had relevant, viable DFS and fantasy options. Plummer at quarterback. My man Jaden Ott at running back did us well a couple of games, kind of fell off there at the end. And then, of course, our man, Jordan Tyson, who ended up getting hurt later on in the season, came through in a big way for us, had a monstrous game. I believe it was against ASU. He had a 155 touchdown, 80-yard punt return touchdown. So we had some good stuff out of this. I got myself confused. Sorry, Tyson from Colorado. Good stuff out of this Cal team. And it's going to be much better. Now they bring in a guy from Texas State who was the head coach there, Jake Spadaville. He was the offensive coordinator of Cal back in 2016. That was when the offense was pretty much its highest iteration. They averaged almost 40 points per game. They did lead the Pac-12 in total offense. And he also, throughout the years, has coached the likes of Johnny Manziel, which at one time was a big deal, Kyler Murray, and, everybody's favorite, America's quarterback, Geno Smith. And so he's got this, kind of high-flying offense. Now, Texas State, they didn't win a ton of games, but their offense was definitely productive, and there was a lot of goodness there to be had. They weren't on the slate a lot, but when the few times they were on the slate, Texas State definitely put up points. So under Spadaville, they're definitely going to be a different-looking offense. Coming into it with quarterback, we know Plummer's off to Louisville. They're going to have a bit of a competition, but right now the two main guys to know would be Sam Jackson, who was a transfer from TCU, and Ben Finley, who was a on and off again quarterback at NC State. Jackson's the favorite. Looking at him, former kind of top 300 prospect, dual threat guy. Didn't play a ton under TCU, but he is a dual threat capable player. He played multiple positions in high school, and reading up on it and all the talk, it does sound like he's going to be the one at the wheel. And I think he's going to be a very viable quarterback and somebody who will probably come into the season really cheap and somebody that maybe folks are a bit gun shy because it's Cal, a quarterback for Cal. How can we use them? Even though Plummer came through several times at 6K, 6.5, 7K, things like that. I think Jackson will be somebody we can definitely rely on there, assuming he beats Ben Finley for the job. I think he will. Now, running back, I'd love to tell you, hey, Jaden Ott, who rushed for 900 yards and 8 touchdowns last year, watch out. He's going to be a bell cow, 1,000-plus yards guaranteed, 20 touchdowns. Ott is the guy. But Cal's really loaded up through the transfer portal on the running back side of things. Ott definitely at the wheel, but I don't know that we'll see him get these 25 to 30 carry games. They did bring in Brian Cardwell from Oregon, Justin Williams-Thomas from Tennessee, and King Duru, who I almost can't believe has any more eligibility from Purdue. Duru's more of a, he can catch a little bit. He can do some damage there in the red zone and whatnot. But I think Ott will get the majority of the carries, but there's going to be games where we're a little disappointed, where maybe his carry share is a little bit, under 15 carries. And I worry that Ott might come out a little bit more expensive to start the season, making him a little bit hard to use overall. So we'll have to watch how that turns out. But the Cal running back room is extremely, extremely deep. At wide receiver, they do bring back two main guys, Jeremiah Hunter, who was almost 1,000-yard receiver last year, and Maven Anderson, who had about 40 catches, 350, 370 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Those are the two main guys coming back. Let me pull this up real quick. Offensively, again, they left a little something to be desired, right? They averaged 24 points per game, 96th. I think we'll see them do a lot better. Now, you might look at it and be like, but they're losing J. Michael Sturdivant, who looked like an absolute stud. How can you lose a wide receiver like that and have any sort of, expectations for, this wide receiver room to be that good? And a lot of these upper tier wide receivers have transferred in conference, which is a little bit weird to me, but Sturdivant, one of those guys, which we'll get to in a second. But they do bring in a couple transfers of their own, one being Brian Hightower, who's in his 6th year out of Miami, Ohio, and Illinois. Injuries be damned. And Taj Davis, who is from UW, my neck of the woods. 21 catches, 277 yards, and 3 touchdowns a season ago for Taj Davis. Like him as a kind of borderline WR2, WR3. He had some pretty good games at times throughout his time at Washington. There was no consistency when it came to Taj Davis, but he did have this random 1-2 games per season where he did pop off. And a lot of times it was relevant or viable is a better word to use him like on Showdown at 2K and some of these other price points. 2 seasons ago, he did have 26 catches for 329 yards and a touchdown. That was in 9 games. And then I followed it up with the 21, 277, 3. So relatively pulling up. It was one of the games in the earlier part of the season. See against Arizona State, 5 catches for 50 yards. That is something I think we'll see out of him a lot. That's kind of that 550 and 1 stat line. When Jake and I talk about that a lot, where you're rostering that kind of cheaper wide receiver who maybe doesn't have the highest target share, but he's shown flashes, and it's like, hey, at the very worst, can he give me 550 and a touchdown? If yes, play. If not, maybe look elsewhere. He also had a game earlier in the season against Kent State where he had 72 yards and a touchdown. So Taj Davis, I think, will thrive in this offense for sure. And overall, Cal's definitely looking like a team that, again, probably won't win too many games, but they're going to be exciting. I do think Sam Jackson is going to be a very, very fun quarterback for DFS purposes, and I don't think a lot of people are going to end up knowing what to do with him. And a lot of that's going to depend on, obviously, his price, but just the fact that Cal's not going to be looked at as a team that people want to use. And a lot of time what happens when a team comes out, say Cal comes out, they're 1-6. Oh, I can't use that team. As more casual players come in, they'll cast him aside. Meanwhile, 6.5K Sam Jackson is, capable of putting up a 35 to 40 fantasy point game at 3%. Kind of a no-brainer, right? So we may have that opportunity with Cal throughout the season. Moving on to Arizona State. Pac-12's got so many different new coaches around. Kenny Dillingham's going to take over at ASU here. Program under Edwards just didn't really get where it needed to be despite having plenty of talent. Dillingham is a bit younger, 33 years old. Also a former ASU graduate, so he's got that, going for him with the lineage there in the program. And also he's done a really nice job taking advantage of the transfer portal. Another team here in ASU that's kind of, been able to go out and shop in the portal and load up in various ways. Now there's going to be a quarterback battle for sure. And Emory Jones obviously gone. Trenton Bourget, who played when Emory was out or injured or couldn't play, and then they ended up kind of splitting there for a bit, is the incumbent. But he's going to have to deal with Drew Pine coming in from Notre Dame, who's still young, and then the highly touted freshman Jaden Rashada. Rashada, who he was famous for going to Florida, right? And he fell apart there because he had an NIL deal, which was multi-millions of dollars. I mean, we're talking about some people saying 13 million. Like, what? This is crazy, man. I got to go take my kid outside right now and wake him up and start having him throw the football around because damn. But that NIL deal apparently fell apart. And with that happening, he ends up taking his services to ASU. Now, I don't know that he's necessarily going to get the job because it's not as if Bourget and Pine are like going to be pushovers for a kid like Rashada. I would be a little bit worried about him coming in a little bit maybe cocky or overzealous and getting humbled real quick. For him, it's best if he just takes the a backup role and kind of learns things. And maybe they use him on special packages. We'll see. Pine, to me, looks like the guy that is maybe in the driver's seat. Did throw for over 2,000 yards, 22 touchdowns a season ago. And then Bourget was under 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns, and that was across 7 games while kind of splitting at times with Emory Jones when he wasn't hurt. So definitely a good problem to have, but eventually Rashada will be the guy there, and we'll see what happens. But I like Pine to win that gig. We'll see. I don't think, regardless of who wins it between Pine and Bourget, I mean, if Rashada wins it, and then I'll have to change my stance because I think he is going to be pretty electric. But between those two guys, Pine and Bourget, I'm not super excited about the fantasy prospects about either of them, if we're going to be honest. Now, at running back, they have to replace Xavier Valladay. That's obviously not going to be easy. Valladay was an absolute stud while his time at Wyoming. He was a stud last year, on the late night slates, which were kind of a FTN specialty. We won a lot of money with Valladay throughout the season, so he will be missed. But they do bring in some good depth and a player that I want you guys to get to know. I want to make sure I don't butcher his name. I listened to an interview with him to make sure I could say it right. But Cameron Scetabo, he is a transfer from Sacramento State. Now, I did know about him from paying attention to FCS stuff because when you're in the grind, you start looking at other, football stuff and you just try to ingest as much as you can. So I do pay attention to FCS. Scetabo is an absolute stud. Almost 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns last season, 31 catches for 371 yards, another 3 touchdowns there. His YPC is what really stands out. And obviously, at Sacramento State, it's not as if he's going up against SEC defenses. So we have to take that into consideration. But still, when you look at a guy with a YPC of 7, you have to really kind of turn your head a little bit and be like, whoa, what's this all about? That's 3rd all-time on the Sacramento State list, which is insane. He had 8 100-yard rushing games and also 7 runs of 25-plus yards. In my notes, I had to write the word in all caps, what? So Scetabo is obviously the front runner to take the job there and kind of replicate that production that's going to be gone from Valladay and from a couple years back, late-night favorite Rachaad White. We affectionately called him Rachel. I think Scetabo is going to be that next guy in line for an ASU team that habitually brings out and puts out a strong DFS relevant running back. So he's the guy for sure. DeCarlos Brooks transfers over from Cal. He had a 4.2 YPC last year, mostly as a backup. He did rush for 250 yards and a touchdown, so he's at least capable, kind of form a tandem there. I don't expect him to unseat Cameron into like a 50-50 timeshare by any means, but he'll probably get 5 to 8 carries, per game there, enough to keep Scetabo from completely, falling apart there or getting injured, knock on wood. And also Tevin White, who's a sophomore, on 14 carries last season, he had a YPC of about 5. He's just somebody that I wanted to highlight because watching some of his tape or in his spring games, he's looked pretty good. So I definitely think Tevin White could actually usurp Carlos Brooks as like the RB2 there. Eventually, we'll see. Wide receiver, they're pretty packed. They have actually a really good receiver room here at ASU. The primary returner, or the top returner, I should say, is Elijah Badger. 70 catches, almost 900 yards, 7 touchdowns. So you know what you're going to get there with him. Also bringing back Andre Johnson, who caught 15 passes for 130 yards and a touchdown. lesser used. It looks like he's going to be far, far down the depth chart, but still a guy that will occasionally get used, somebody that you've heard of. Now, they do bring in a myriad of other guys here. Xavier Guillory, who's an Idaho State transfer. Sounds like right now he's the favorite to kind of take that WR2 spot. His spring has been very strong. Last year, he had over 700 yards and 4 touchdowns. So Guillory next to Badger looks like your best bet, at least early on. Now, they also bring in my man Tyson. Got myself too much going on with work. I got myself confused about where Tyson came from. Colorado, not Cal, obviously. He ends up at ASU, so another intra-conference transfer. His season ended with a pretty serious injury, which was terrible because Tyson was just starting to heat up there. And man, that I'm never going to forget that low ownership game he gave us last year where he just absolutely destroyed. And he's certainly a brand favorite and a hashtag Walt's guys because of that. Now they are expecting him to get healthy and be ready to go and start hitting the field with pads, sometime in August. So very soon. But as of right now, he hasn't, been doing much. But that flash of what he did against ASU last year, again, that 115 and touchdown game with an 88-yard punt return touchdown, obviously shows you what this kid is capable. You just hope an injury that like he suffered that took a lot out of him and ended a season doesn't have any lingering effects or zap him from any of his, burst, like we've seen some previous injuries due to guys in the past in both basketball and in football. They also have Melquan Stovall coming in, who seems like, he's been around forever between Nevada and Colorado State. He does have, for his career across 4 years, 121 catches, almost 1,200 yards, and just 1 touchdown. No touchdown equity for Stovall. I don't expect him to have any here, but he is, a veteran in the receiver room, and they're already talking about him being a leader. So he has that going for him, but it'll be a rarity, I think, for him to really be a relevant week-to-week consistent DFS option. He'll have a random blow-up game, certainly, but he's just not going to be a guy unless he's like, sub 4K that we're really going to talk about that often, unless Tyson has any setbacks. They do have former walk-on Giovanni Sanders. He's expected to be a big factor. A lot of outlets saying that he's going to be a breakout. Pretty cool story. Goes from walk-on to JUCO kid to, now he's going back to ASU where he's, going to have an opportunity to play relevant snaps and possibly be a factor. And then Jake Smith. Transfers from USC. He was at Texas before. The last 2 years, he hasn't played really at all. Injuries and then academics. While at Texas, he caught almost 50 passes, 568 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So certainly can do it when healthy, certainly can do it when he's getting the grade. So we'll see what happens there with him. And then at tight end, Jalen Conyers, who will be the tight end 1 and will be DFS relevant probably right away, actually. 12 catches, 5 touchdowns. He's, didn't have a lot of, PPR work, but definitely a high touchdown equity, red zone target, big threat, and somebody who's going to be used in this ASU offense quite a bit. Jalen Conyers. All right, moving right along here, we're going to go to the Colorado Buffaloes. Deion Sanders, Dion taking the reins here. The Buffaloes offense, man, what can you say? Aside from Tyson, doing his thing for the 1 game, that offense was terrible. Quarterback play for Colorado has been absolutely atrocious. I mean, some of the worst quarterback play. We're talking like those of you who did USFL with me at all, on a week-to-week basis, you see how bad and porous that quarterback play was and is. That's what the Buffalo situation was like. So it's tough for them, and I can only say that it's only up from here. Obviously, there's going to be there already is a lot of electricity around their program getting Deion Sanders in there. He brings with him, his son Shador from Jackson State to run the offense. That's going to be a big deal. They bring in a new offensive coordinator, Sean Lewis, who was the head coach at Kent State. Deion and company, right when they took the Colorado job, they went out and got their guy, and they had to pay a $750,000 buyout just to get Sean Lewis out of Kent State and into the OC position at Colorado. Now, Kent State, blurred that out. Kent State, another team that, probably should have won more games than they did. They didn't, but offensively they were awesome. And that's the theme of a lot of these offensive coordinators that guys brought in, or head coaches. Like, they didn't win a ton, but man, their offense is ridiculous. And that's going to be the case here with Colorado. Last season, Kent State ranked 5th in passing yards, 10th in plays per game, and 30th in points per game. That was with, the DFS, Maction God, Crum, who absolutely dominated on a week-to-week basis for us while at Kent State. Lewis's offense, there's a lot of reads. There's a high tempo, time of possession, not the longest. There's a lot of quick strikes. There's elements of the air raid, a lot of out wide, multiple wide receivers on the perimeter. There's just a ton to like about it. They called it the flash fast offense while at Kent State. They're already calling it the buff fast offense here in Colorado. Might need to work on that name a little bit, but overall, Colorado's offense is going to be nasty. There's no doubt in my mind. Shedeur Sanders, in his 2 years at Jackson State, threw for almost 7,000 yards, 70 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. The only thing I worry about for him is he wasn't much of a runner at Jackson State, at all. He would much rather, you see these quarterbacks who their first or second read, they're gone. It's like, hey, let things develop. Sanders maybe lets things develop a little bit too much. If he doesn't have an open receiver, he's not necessarily looking to take off and run. And that's some part of his game they're going to have to really work on, because to be successful in a Sean Lewis offense, you have to have a quarterback who is going to be willing to mix it up with his legs. Not every time, and he has to not force it, of course. But if a play breaks down and there's nobody open, you need a guy to really take off. And if a guy like Dustin Crum can do it, who is a big-armed quarterback and kind of a bigger guy, who's like 6'4", 6'5", something like that. If he can take off and run and do it successfully, then Sanders has got to be able to. He rushed for 700 yards, 2 different times, which is ridiculous. Back in 2021, the big season there, where he rushed for 703 yards and 12 touchdowns. Like, get out of here with that. He also threw for 3,200 yards and 20 touchdowns. So Shedeur Sanders is looking at a big, relevant DFS season immediately. And looking at the backups for Colorado, they're not tasty at all. I think Shedeur Sanders has this job. God forbid there's an injury there, because if there is, it's going to be real, real bad. The nice thing for Colorado is they do have a stable of running backs. So if something were to happen with Sanders, they would be able to run the ball a lot. And even with the opposing team knowing it, I don't think there could be a lot that they would do to actually stop it. They do bring in Alton McCaskill from Houston, who missed all of last year with an ACL injury. You guys, and a lot of people might have forgotten, but Alton McCaskill in 2021 was just an absolute auto play each and every week in DFS. Almost 900 yards, 16 touchdowns, and that was as a freshman in 2021. So again, another guy who with missing time with a serious injury. You hope that burst is there. You hope that he's not going to be afraid to get hit. You hope that ability and everything is still intact. A lot of times those serious injuries, and we don't see it as much. People forget, even a decade ago, coming back from a serious ACL was, it was tough. And 20 years ago, it was pretty much a career ender, right? We see guys so often, mostly at the pro level, come back from these serious injuries that I think we take it for granted a little bit, and we just expect them to come out and immediately be that guy they were before. And we're seeing these athletes push their body so much, and you get into these collegiate levels, some of these guys they're not the same, or they won't ever be the same. So I am jumping in hard with the rest of the industry on Alton McCaskill, but I do want to actually, give myself a little bit of room to not go all in just yet, just in case he's not that same guy that he was 2 years ago. But obviously, Dion went out and got his guy, and that was Alton McCaskill, who he really likes. So he's going to get the RB1 job in majority of those carries from day one. There's no doubt about it. They do bring in a Kentucky transfer. Cavassier Smoke still has a couple of, or at least 1 year of eligibility, I should say. He has operated as the primary backup since 2018, rushed for about 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns over the course of his career. So a guy who can come in there if you have an injury, or if you have a guy who's ineffective, or you need to change it up a little bit. Cavassier Smoke is definitely that guy who can do it. And also the most intriguing running back in the room, not Kavasier Smoke, not Alton McCaskill, but a freshman, a 4-star freshman by the name of Dylan Edwards. Highest rated running back in the class, legitimate home run hitting ability. Initially I thought maybe they would try to redshirt him or save him, but I don't know. I don't think they can. I think he might have to play right away. I don't think he will get the mileage on him, but they're going to definitely give him opportunities, and I think he's going to, hit Katron Allen like home runs with the ball from time to time. I don't know that this, Edwards McCaskill backfield would turn into a Penn State situation by any means, but I do think Dylan Edwards is going to be a factor. And there'll be weeks where, I might take my shot in GPP. It'll be like, those weeks that come up that me and Jake we find a GPP guy or some guy that's a hidden gem. Hey, if he gets 10 to 15 snaps at 3.2K, scores a touchdown, we might be in business. And sometimes we hit those, sometimes we don't. But there will be a week, I have a feeling, where I'm hyping up Dylan Edwards to the moon, and we'll see. Typically do it with wide receivers, though, because I usually spend my money on running backs, but we'll see if I change my strategy here a little bit more this season. At wide receiver, they do bring another Jackson State transfer with him, Travis Hunter, former #1 recruit in the country, plays on both sides of the ball, defense and offense. He caught about 18 passes, 200 yards, 4 touchdowns as a receiver last year. As a DB, 15 tackles, 2 interceptions, a defensive touchdown. That's impressive. And 8 pass deflections. So Travis Hunter is a cool guy. I worry that he'll be a little overpriced to start because of name and pedigree. It'd be a situation where he's like 8K or something. I would gladly let others jump on that and not use him. But if he comes into it at like 4K for large field GPPs early on, he's absolutely worth a shot because they're going to put him in a position to succeed. I don't know that he'll get the volume. The volume for me, or in my opinion, will come with the other transfers that they got from USF. They got Jimmy Horn coming in and Xavier Weaver. Jimmy Horn, 68 catches, 408 yards, and a touchdown in 2 years with USF. Weaver, meanwhile, 117 catches, 1,700 yards, and 8 touchdowns in 4 years with USF. He had his best season last year with 53 catches, 716 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So look for Weaver and Horn to both be relatively productive. I think Shador, he has obviously that rapport with Hunter, but I really think one of Horn and Weaver are going to become his preferred option. Those guys are going to become a big-time PPR option. Likely Xavier Weaver will have a ton of production. And I'll be watching out for prices on those guys early on, but those are the relevant Colorado names to really know right now. All right, moving on to Stanford. We're cruising. Stanford Cardinal, they're bringing in a new coach as well, Troy Taylor. 3 Big Sky championships with Sacramento State. So you got in the conference here, Sacramento State's running back to ASU and Sacramento State's coach to Stanford. Didn't make the package deal together. But the Hornets averaged 43 points, 500 yards per game. Clearly, and looking around at other FCS teams, they were one of the most efficient offenses in the FCS. Will that translate to Stanford? I think it will to a degree. They have the talent. The big problem for Stanford is at quarterback. It's not looking great. Ashton Daniels has been given the opportunity to win the job. I'm looking at Ari Patu. He has, dual threat upside, legit mobility. He's a big kid, though, 6'4", 220 pounds. But he's also mobile. When you get a guy that size who can run a little bit, that typically is the type of quarterback you want to have out there in 2023, with the way things are. So he's the one that I ultimately think wins the job. I'm not particularly excited about either of them. I will be clear about that. Now, Emmitt Smith's son coming back, EJ Smith, after the season-ending injury last year. In the 2 games he played prior to injury, looked like All-American, best running back on the planet. 30 carries, 207 yards, 3 touchdowns in those 2 games. He also caught all 8 of his targets with a touchdown. So a healthy Smith should get a ton of work this season. I don't think that they'll, treat him like a baby or have training wheels on him. I think they'll turn him loose as soon as he's ready. But the nice thing is that Casey Filkins already has proven that he's capable of a bigger workload, and they might opt to kind of run them in a 60-40 type split. I don't think it'll be a true 50-50, maybe a 70-30, but Filkins proved last year that he deserves touches. Almost 500 yards on the ground, 4 rushing touchdowns. That was across the 7 games that he played. That was on 120 carries. Solid. He was also targeted 27 times, caught 17 of those 27 targets, 200 yards, and a touchdown there. So Filkins was fantasy relevant for a long time. There came a point where he got overpriced and you couldn't use him anymore. But for 3 or 4 weeks, he was priced below $6K, and he just kept churning out 20-plus fantasy points. It was a no-brainer. At wide receiver, it gets dicey. They only have really one relevant returner at the wide receiver position, which is John Humphreys. 4th on the team in targets a year ago with 47, caught 29 of those for 350 yards and a touchdown. Now, they do bring back an FTN favorite at tight end, which is Benjamin Urasek. We didn't use him as much last year, but 2 years ago when nobody knew who Urasek was, he was a late slate hero for us, scoring touchdowns and overall being a PPR guy. Over the last 2 seasons, he's had a stat line of 91 catches, 1,100 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Also been targeted 127 times. So looking at what Stanford has, pass catchers, the receiver room, it's not that exciting beyond Humphreys. There'll be other guys who emerge, of course. But right now, Benjamin Urasek looks like the top option on this offense as a pass catcher. I fear that he'll come out a little bit overpriced. 2 years ago, we could get him at near min price all the time, 5% ownership. He crushed it. Last year, people knew more of who he was. Injuries up and down that Stanford receiver room, and Urasek became more of a popular option for a while, which caused his price to rocket up. We'll see what happens there if they continue to ratchet that price up, or if he becomes more cheap again as well. But a lot of that will depend on, obviously, the summer and how much the DK pricing algorithm helpers, I'll call them, look at spring performance and summer practice. All right, moving right along, we'll go into USC. And you'll have to excuse me because I have notes on all of this, but I'll pull up depth charts here. Or expected depth charts, because my computer, by the way, speaking of having a lot of mileage, this laptop has a ton of mileage. Like, we gave this laptop 500 plus carries each of the last 3 years, and it has very little life left. I need a new one. I need to win 10K again so I can buy a new one. Not that I need a computer 10K, but, something nice. All right, so USC, obviously or not, they're a video game-esque, arcade-style scoring machine, but it's important to realize other teams in the Pac-12, which we've already highlighted and we will highlight, are putting up points. Well, I think that's going to be important because as leverage folks, we know we like our leverage. We know that. There's going to be opportunities with USC slates to fade some of those guys because they're going to be priced super high. I mean, Caleb Williams is not going to be cheap. We know that. He rarely is. He wasn't that much last year. The weapons on USC eventually won't be cheap either. Addison, I mean, he's not there anymore, but he was, one of the most expensive wide receivers on the board consistently. Still, we found Jordan Addison before everyone else at Pittsburgh, by the way. Got to still pat ourselves on the back. This offense is going to be fun. There's going to be slates where, yes, if you fade pieces of it and it goes off at chalk ownership, you're going to be kind of, taken in the shorts a little bit. But there's going to be other times where you get a cheaper option that gets a close number to what these USC guys score. And then that discount you took allowed you to get another option where Caleb Williams and 3K punt going up against 7K quarterback that got 85% of Caleb Williams' score, and also, a mid-range guy who's clearly going to, beat out that 3K prayer. So I'm a little balanced at times. Do I want to get in the habit of fading Caleb Williams? Probably not. Will I fade him more than the field? Absolutely. This is going to come into play for pricing for me because I don't want to get in the habit. For football, I've noticed you get in the habit of running too many punt prayer plays and you just end up with bagels or 1-5 points. And yes, Caleb Williams dropping 40 to 50 points. Like this is amazing. It's great. But just taking that sub 5 score, even at a 3-5 price, it hurts, man. It hurts. Especially when you have, two other guys, your 2v2. Yeah, Caleb Williams scored 40, and I got 2 from this cheapie at 42. My 2 other guys scored 30 each. I'm well ahead of that Caleb Williams lineup at this point. So sometimes those value punt plays go nuts as well, so don't think they don't. But I do want to temper expectations, not because I think USC won't produce, but because I think there will be a ceiling cap on a lot of these players depending on their prices. And they're going to be so popular that the price tags on these guys are going to go super, super high. I have doubt in my mind about that. Obviously, Caleb Williams, one of the top quarterbacks coming back. 4,500 yards, last year, 42 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. Just, phenomenal stuff from Caleb Williams. All about him. Gosh, what do you rush for? Let's pull rushing yards, almost 400 yards, 10 touchdowns. Like, I don't even have to rattle that off for you. Now, the receiver room, solid. They're getting back Mario Williams. That, getting Super Mario back, I think that's important. Obviously, losing Jordan Addison and Taj Washington, that's, 2 players that had well over 700 yards each. Super Mario did have 631 yards, 40 catches, 5 touchdowns. He kind of jumps into that probable WR1 spot, but maybe WR2 with one of the transfers they got in. Brennan Rice is back, who also kind of almost quietly racked up 600 receiving yards on 39 catches and 4 touchdowns himself. Not a lot of people talking about Brennan Rice, but he's certainly a capable guy. Michael Jackson comes back, not the singer. He's not back from the dead, but Michael Jackson, the receiver, 17 catches, 236 yards, 4 touchdowns a season ago. Quality. Dorian Singer. Dorian Singer comes in as a guy that I think has an opportunity after what he did with Arizona to take over in a big way and put up some monster numbers and be that Addison-esque player in the offense. Now, it was definitely disappointing to see, Addison not hit 1,000 yards. Would have liked to have seen him do a little bit more, but the offense, there's just so many weapons on it still. And I think that ends up being the problem here with Singer's overall upside. I think he's going to have games where he absolutely just murders slates. Like we're talking about, 40 fantasy point games potentially in this offense where he's going to have games where he catches 3 touchdowns. Like that's going to be a real thing. And you look at what he did in the Arizona offense, which obviously was nowhere near the level of the USC offense and won't be. Even with all these Pac-12 teams taking steps forward with their coaching staff offensively, Arizona's offense just will never be USC's. This iteration. Singer a year ago, 66 catches, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Really almost just came fully off the radar. Now, if you paid attention in his freshman season when he caught 18 balls for 301 yards, you would see there were flashes during those games. This kid has hands. He can really break plays. He averaged, 17 yards per catch. Like this is a nice player, but nobody really could have seen him be a to that level 1,100 yard receiver. So coming into the USC offense here, taking over that Jordan Addison role. Obviously Mario there, Brennan Rice. There's not going to be a monopolizing really big games. And it's going to be similar. Like I was really disappointed because at Pittsburgh, I rostered Jordan Addison all the time, like 80% of the season. For USC, it was tougher because priced up, my salary sinks into the quarterback and the wide receiver. Suddenly, 20% of my cap or more is gone. And he puts up a 19, it hurts you. It really, really hurts. So I don't know. I'm looking a little bit beyond Dorian Singer because I do feel like he's going to be priced up. But he's definitely the guy that I think replaces Jordan Addison's production. Now they around the room in the interviews with some of these receivers, whether that's Taj, whether it's Brendan Rice, they all expect to play at an even faster pace, which is pretty wild when you think about how fast that team really was. I mean, it's insane to think about, and it could just be talk, but I think USC puts up these basketball-like scores. Their receiving core, Rice, Mario, Dorian, and suddenly it's like, GPPs are one with those guys, and people are taking bagels. And I think strategically there will be a game or two where, taking those two studs and bageling at the 3K makes sense, and you're going to win a GPP like that. But I just think it's a little more hit or miss than people think. And looking at the depth of the roster, that to me is something that worries me a bit. It's almost like in college basketball when Duke and Kentucky come into it and their rosters are so loaded and deep. Like, they're going to be good. They're going to score a lot of points, but this production is going to kind of bounce around, and that really honestly kind of concerns me a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, slot work, a lot of moving parts here and pieces in this offense. It's going to be a juggernaut, but it might be more spread out than we think. At running back, Austin Jones still there. They do bring in Marshawn Lloyd of South Carolina fame, so an SEC experience in this offense. Kind of a deceptively fast type of back. You look at it, the rushing yards for last year, Travis Dye had over 800 yards. He's gone. Austin Jones coming back had 705 yards, YPC of 5.2. And then you had Raleek Brown there with almost 250 yards. Barlow, just 100. And then, of course, Caleb Williams, who had 400 out of the quarterback spot. So I think Lloyd will have an opportunity to in this offense, and it could be somebody that could be a little bit sneaky. Running USC running backs last year was not the easiest thing to do because, again, spread out production on a game-to-game basis, which I think will happen here again. All right, sorry, my laptop is giving me trouble here. All right, so yes, USC, the greatest, the best. All right, moving on to America's real team, the Washington Huskies. Man, how could you not love? I'm a homer, obviously, West Coast guy, originally from Washington State, North Seattle, and it's, I don't know. To me, sports are fun when Washington has a relevant football team and a relevant basketball team. And it seems like when the Pac-12 has somebody other than USC playing well, it gets a little bit more exciting for everyone. Be able to replicate, at least on paper, what they did last year with the 11-win season. Getting back some truly crucial pieces. I mean, losing Taj Davis, that sucks. He's good, but Rome Dunze comes back. Jalen McMack, Jeremy Bernard, who is super fast. Giles Jackson, who is super fast. a bunch of freshman wide receivers who are coming in that aren't going to have to play immediately and are going to be able to play behind these studs and eventually turn into something special. Rashid Williams, Keith Reynolds, Denzel Boston. Like, there's some names waiting in the wings that I'm really excited about, but our frontline starters at receiver are going to be phenomenal. And of course, Michael Penix coming back, as Dylan Morris backing him up. Obviously, Heward, legacy man, Heward is gone. There just wasn't going to be a job for him as long as Michael Penix is healthy. His arm strength wise, he's one of the best that there is. I think at Indiana, he showed us enough of that when healthy. And my God, years and years ago, I don't know if anyone's going to remember, aside from the people who are even with me at YFC, we used Penix at Indiana against Ohio State, and he had like the game of a lifetime against Ohio State, and really showed, when healthy, he can mix it up and run a little bit, but his decision making when it comes to passing the football is really, really good, and I'm excited about him in this offense for another year. And you look at what he did last year, completed 65% of those passes, 4,600 yards, 31 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Like, I think we're looking at him getting 35 to 40 touchdowns this year. He's not obviously going to be much of a runner. However, in the red zone, he will call his own number. We do see him score touchdowns in the area, not by any means, but he will score rushing touchdowns in that area. So I'm a big fan, obviously, of the Huskies, and I feel pretty confident about their ability and what they're going to do this season with another 10 to 11 win season. At running back, there are several options. Their running back room kind of a revolving door. They lost quite a few pieces. They do have Cameron Davis back, who is the main returner, along with Richard Newton. Those are your two primary returning running backs on a team that you look at last year. Wayne Talapapa, who rushed for almost 900 yards. He's gone. Will Nixon, Javion Sunday. These are all guys who decided, to move along. Cameron Davis did rush for 522 yards, had 13 touchdowns. Richard Newton rushed for 200 yards and a touchdown, had a bigger role a couple of years ago, but still a capable back when healthy. Cameron Davis, though, definitely the guy to be looking at. They're all bringing in some transfers, one being Daniel Nagata, another in-conference transfer from ASU. I thought Nagata might end up being the guy at ASU, but didn't want to stick around to see. We also bring in Dylan Johnson of Mississippi State, hard-nosed running back to get tough yardage as well. So it'll be a situation where there'll be some games that this is just the way the Huskies are, where Cameron Davis has heavy carries, racks it up. People will go to him the next week, and then you'll see suddenly, Richard Newton gets 12 carries, scores 2 touchdowns. One week it'll be Nagata. One week Dylan Johnson. I mean, it's just kind of bounces around there. So that is kind of a frustrating aspect to the running backs for Washington. But overall, it's definitely a fantasy-friendly environment for everybody involved. All of these teams or all of these players on the Huskies definitely going to do some damage. I think he has an opportunity to be a very fantasy relevant tight end. Devin Culp, of course, and we'll see what happens there with some of these other options like Quentin Moore, Josh Quivis, and Ryan Otten. But overall, this is going to be a offense we want to target the passing game from. Whenever you play Michael Penix, and he'll be expensive, you want to definitely pair him up with one of Jalen McMillan or Rome Odunze. If they give either of those guys to us cheap like they did at the beginning of last year, we will punish the field. We will punish with those guys. I suspect they'll be expensive to start the year. We're not catching anybody by surprise with those guys. There will be times where we can take shots with Giles Jackson, Jeremy Bernard, and Jalen Polk. But overall, this is Rome and Jalen McMillan's team. And looking at it here, let me pull up one other thing. On the internet with Jeremy Bernard, he's fast. Last year at Michigan State, caught 7 passes for 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's a guy that I'm very intrigued by. I think we'll see him break 1 or 2 big ones this year. Won't be a reliable DFS option, but Bernard is going to be a guy that you can use in showdowns at like 1.5K and will win you a showdown because he scores a 70-yard touchdown. Like, that's the Huskies offense to be one of the most fantasy friendly in the nation by far. All right, Utah Utes. Let's move along to Utah. Now, Utah's offense is going to be deceptively good once again. It seems like every year they're underrated, even though they continue to prove people wrong about, oh, this is kind of a mediocre to average offense. Like, they've got pieces that are fantasy relevant time and time again. Cameron Rising coming back. He's a good quarterback. He's a sneaky dual threat guy. You got to respect Cam Rising as a legitimate DFS option and quarterback who you can pay 7K for, or perhaps even 7.5K for, and have him pay off. He's really quite good at the game of football. Threw for 26 touchdowns last year, 8 interceptions, over 3,000 yards. Banged up from time to time, but still a tough kid. But this is the part that's going to shock some of you. He rushed for almost 500 yards a season ago, 6 touchdowns, even caught a 9-yard pass. You see, they use him in a myriad of ways. So Cam Rising to me is a really good option. Borderline, like, still the sneakiest quarterback in the Pac-12, despite the fact that everybody should know what he's capable of. At the running back position, they still have Jalen Glover. They still have Micah Bernard. Micah Bernard was a guy that a lot of people thought was eventually going to take the gig over and really just, be the RB1 for Utah at times. He did rush for 533 yards, when Tavion Thomas was going through it, getting, benched, scratched, all that stuff happening. Micah Bernard played in all 14 games for the team. He had a YPC of 5. He caught 34 passes for 314 yards, but he seemed to fade late, and they still use him as a pass catcher. But it became clear other times Jalen Glover was a better back, or everybody's breakout candidate for Utah, Jaquindon Jackson, who did rush for 531 yards in 12 games on just 78 carries, a YPC of 6.8. He scored 9 touchdowns during that 12-game stretch. And his YPC, like Bernard's YPC, high at 5, but it took him 106 carries to get to the same yardage total when it took 78 for Jaquindon Jackson. He will not catch anyone by surprise. The nice thing about Utah is they have him in place that continues to produce high-caliber, fantasy-relevant running backs year in and year out. Jaquindon Jackson has pedigree. He was at Texas back during the COVID year, decided to transfer over to Utah, and now we're seeing, the way he erupted a season ago, especially later on in the season. There's just no way he's not going to win the RB1 job, and I think we see him keep it and kind of put up those Tavion Thomas expected numbers without the random scratches or random benchings. You look at the way he ended the season, the last 3 games, 10 carries for 117 yards, 3 touchdowns against Colorado, 13 carries for 105 yards, 2 touchdowns against USC, and 13 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown against Penn State. That was in the bowl game. So there is a lot to like about Jaquindon Jackson. Somebody who I think could end up being a little bit underpriced to start, but I don't think anyone will be fooled by him like they would be with Cam Rising still to this day. I think a lot of grinders or most people who follow college football at this point know that Utah, they're going to have a solid running back group, and whoever gets those RB1 carries is going to be a fantasy relevant guy and somebody that you most likely have to have, or you're going to watch him end up in the optimal and you're not going to have it. So love Jaquindon Jackson. I think he's going to be an absolute baller. Tight end U, this is the real tight end U, Brant Kuithe. Thomas Yasmin and Manure McLean. Manure is an unfortunate name. That's your tight end group. We know Brant Kuthi is a dog at the tight end spot. They give a lot of work to their tight ends. Cam Rising has an affinity for them, so look for Brant Kuthi to continue to be a very high caliber DFS and overall fantasy option. There's no doubt about it. Returners in the wide receiver room, not quite as good. Devon Bailey does return, so that's obviously huge. Bailey had 695 yards a season ago, 55 catches and 5 touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid, who is gone, 900 yards, 70 catches, and 8 touchdowns. Now, Kuthi, who ended up being hurt last year, so he only played in 4 games, but in those 4 games, 19 catches, 206 yards, 3 touchdowns. Part of the reason, Kincaid and some of these other guys were able to explode the way they were was the fact that Brant Kuthi just, missed so many games. Kuthi would have had an absolutely huge season, somewhere probably well above 800 yards and 10 plus touchdowns. Now he's going to have the opportunity to do that. There's no Dalton Kincaid. He's the tight end one. You look back at his previous season, pre-injury, 50 catches, 611 yards, 6 touchdowns. The COVID year, they barely played. So 25 catches, 236 yards. The year before that, 34, 602, and 6. And then his true freshman season, which all the way back in 2018, 20 catches for 227 yards and a touchdown. Overall, in parts of 5 seasons, he has 148 catches, over 1,800 yards, 16 touchdowns. Now, they also utilized him in the running game, 17 carries, 160 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Not utilized as a runner as much. Obviously, he was hurt last year. 4 carries only in 2021, but he did have 6 carries for 102 yards back in 2019. I vividly remember Kuthi as a DFS option throughout his time at Utah. Now that he's, really not having to share that position with anyone, I think we see a ton of touches for Kuthi, and he has the potential to be very underpriced as well. So do not sleep on our guy, Brant Kuthi, who's definitely an FTN or Super Show brand favorite is what I should say. Money Parks also back. Money Parks had 26 catches for 414 yards, 2 touchdowns. They have the Mikey Matthews, a freshman, Makai Cope, not the best receiver room in the world here. So look for them to rely heavily on Brant Kuthi, probably see a monstrous season from Bailey, and Money Park should take that step forward as well, just from a sheer volume standpoint. And then look for one of the Utah running backs to break out. Now, if the last couple seasons are thing to be taken in, the running back coming in that we all expected to dominate, it might end up being, RB3, who is that Micah Bernard, Jalen Glover. Like, I wouldn't be shocked to see Jalen Glover, who's still young as well, end up, toting the rock, and racking up 750 yards. Like, that wouldn't be a shocking outcome either for me. All right, moving right along here, the Oregon Ducks. Boo! Not to show my dislike for Oregon, but not a big fan of them. Not a big fan of them. Whenever they struggle, I am always usually quite happy about it. Unfortunately, fortunately, the Oregon Duck basketball program struggled and will continue to, but unfortunately for me as a football program is looking quite nice. They get back Bo Nix. All the trash talkers of Bo Nix over the years had to eat their words. I don't consider myself in the group that had to eat their words because I was actually a pretty big Bo Nix truther during his time at Auburn. Like, I played Bo Nix more than your average DFS player throughout his time at Auburn, regardless of how many times he burned me. But to see him go from consistencies at Auburn, but again, is just gargantuan. 409 pass attempts compared to previous career high of 377, 323 is last year in Auburn. Completed 72% of those passes, previous career high of 61%, 3,600 yards, previous career high of 2,500. 29 touchdowns, not even close, 16 his freshman year, 7 interceptions, which is a really good touchdown to interception ratio. But then you look at it and you come down and you look at his rushing yardage and you're like, okay, throughout the course of his career, Bo Nix has been a pretty solid dual threat guy. 300-plus yards in his freshman and sophomore season. His junior year, which was a pretty big abomination, I think we can all say that, he still rushed for 170 yards, 4 touchdowns. But last year at Oregon, 14 rushing scores, 510 yards. He even caught a touchdown pass, 2 catches, 36 yards, and a touchdown. Bo Nix, as much as I hate to say it and hate to admit, again, I was a Bo Nix truther at Auburn, but he goes to Oregon, and I totally flipped the script and like, I'm never using this guy. It's Oregon. This guy sucks. But no, Bo Nix punishes faders on the regular, and he just had so many big games, and there was really few bust games from Bo Nix that past season. And looking at it, coming back again in this offense, it's going to be stupid. You just wait until you see what Bo Nix does in the second year of this offense. It's not going to be fun for a Husky fan standpoint, but it'll be fun from a DFS standpoint. Now, at the running back spot, they do have continuity. You know, Bucky Irving back, Noah Whittington, little George James. They've got all of those pieces back. Bucky was a 1,000-yard rusher. Noah Whittington also rushed for almost 800 yards. Kind of almost quietly rushed for those 800 because Bucky was such a a menace. It didn't seem like there was ever a time for Noah Whittington to get in there, but he definitely racked it up and had 5 touchdowns, 22 catches for 170 yards. He was a factor. Bucky Irving, though, is going to be the guy. 31 catches, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Again, almost 1,100 rushing yards. He's going to have a big season. Bo Nix and Bucky, like, their receiver room can be totally mediocre, and this team's offense is still going to be just a juggernaut. But when you look at it, they've got some guys coming in, right? Or, coming in, and then also the returners. Now, Oregon receivers the past couple of seasons have been really hard to peg. In fact, when it comes to prop betting, I hit the overs a lot. I don't know. It's kind of a bad habit of mine. But with the Oregon receivers last year, we were able to hit the unders on them a lot more than most other teams just because Bo Nix stealing all these, the attempts, Bucky Irving's a ton of work. And then when they do throw the ball, it's super spread out. When you look at it, Troy Franklin, 61 catches, 900 yards, 9 touchdowns. So there's your WR1. And then it drops down. Chase Cota had 36 catches for 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. Chris Hudson, 44 catches for 472 yards. Terrence Ferguson, 32 catches for 391 yards, 5 touchdowns. Then it drops down. Dante Thornton, 17 catches, 366 yards. Bucky Irving is next on that list, 6 with his 31 and 299. Then you have Noah Whittington, who's 7. Then you had Sean Dollars, who was another running back. You don't have another, receiver until all the way down to, a 6-catch, 95-yard performance from, somebody who, Patrick Herbert, of Herbert fame, really isn't going to be a factor and barely played. It's going to be on the team again this year, but, that's how far you had to go down the list. Now, when you look at that receiver room, it's a lot more respectable, a hell of a lot more respectable. They do bring back, as again, Troy Franklin. So that's huge because that was your WR1, almost 1,000-yard receiver. Certainly a solid talent. And then Chris Hudson, who, has I would say, overall. And then you have Transfer City. And the transfers they got in are really good. They're going to unseat Hudson, I think, pretty quickly. So Hudson, 472 yards last year, 419 the year before, probably somewhere between 300 and 400 again. But the players coming in here, they're just so scary for me. You look at what Tez. Let me pull it up. Why is this laptop doing this? It's got too much mileage. Tez Johnson, just an absolute beast in the Sun Belt. Back-to-back seasons over 700 yards, 56 catches, 863 yards, 4 touchdowns last year for Troy. Troy's offense, they had weapons, they had dudes. Quarterback play at times was a little suspect, but they absolutely had dudes there, and really good ones as well. Treshaun Holden comes in. You saw a Treshaun Holden that was in a similar situation last year with too many cooks in the kitchen. Has a ton of upside. It's the last 3 years in Alabama, but of course there's so many weapons in that offense. Still able to produce 6 touchdowns last year, 25 catches, 331 yards. 6 of his 25 catches were touchdowns. I thought Holden would have a much bigger season. Obviously, it didn't quite pan out. I think he definitely will for him here at Oregon. And then Gary Bryant Jr. Three of being the dummy. You look at it, Chase Cota, his 500 yards, that's replaceable with Tez. You get Ferguson, and you get Hudson and Franklin back. Dante Thornton, you got to replace his 366 yards. I'm pretty sure Gary Bryant can come close to that, right? Treshaun Holden. So there's just way more weapons. This might negatively impact some of running back receiving numbers to a degree. Now, Gary Bryant ended up only playing 3 games last year, but the year before in 2021, we saw him catch 600 yards on 44 receptions and 7 touchdowns. So definitely has that talent there. Assuming he's healthy, he'll contribute. But I do wonder if having these fantastic weapons in the receiver room and still the returning Hudson, Franklin, Ferguson trio does negatively impact Bucky Irving's receiving numbers. Now, he's such a force on the ground game that he's still going to be a viable guy, especially anytime he's under 8K. He's certainly going to be in play. But we may see if his number, balloons up to like closer to 9K for some reason, it may start to get harder to use him with all of these weapons on the team. That remains to be seen how it all shakes out. All right, moving on to the next one here, Oregon State. For us Pacific Northwesterners, by the way, it's like 80 today. That's too hot for us. We live in overcast, so Pete's watching from Florida where it's like 105 and he has a damn windbreaker on. All right, so for Oregon State, and it's tough. It's tough for me because I don't feel ready to call Oregon State and possibly being a top 3 in the Pac-12, but at the end of the day, they definitely are. And quarterback play has really plagued this team, similar to Colorado the last couple of years. They did, Ben Goldbrisson last year certainly had some fantasy relevant games. He was at least adequate to a degree. Chance Nolan couldn't work on what he showed in the past. Tristan Gebbia couldn't build on what he showed in the past. They're just back perspective, and Goldbrisson was kind of thrown into it. Like I said, he showed flashes of being a capable quarterback, but they didn't have the right personnel in there. They bring in our guy DJ Ua from Clemson, who almost you look at it, he's coming from a tough, historically tougher conference, right, in the ACC to the Pac-12. So I think that's clearly going to make a big difference for him. I think DJ gets, a lot of unnecessary hate. I think people look at him and think he's worse than he actually is. And you look at it, he wasn't awful. He showed a lot of flashes that freshman season, right? 900 yards in the games he played, 5 touchdowns. 2021 was very unkind. Only completed 55% of those passes, 9 touchdowns, picked off 10 times. But he had a nice bounce back really last year, and I don't think enough people are really talking about that. He threw for 2,500 yards, which, clearly not at the most. We want to see that up around 3,500, right? But his touchdown to interception ratio, 22-7, that to me shows, poise. He's trying to cut back on those mistakes. He's making his reads. He's doing what he can. And he also turned himself into a much better dual threat option last season. Now, he didn't rush for 300 yards 2 years ago, so he had that in his bag. His YPC was like 2.9, though. A lot of wasted carries there, 4 touchdowns. But last year, 545 yards, 7 touchdowns, a willingness to put his body on the line when plays broke down, and really, a confident runner. He looked a little more timid in 2021. Last year, I saw a much more confident version of DJ, and I think we're going to see him perform quite well here at Oregon State. And it's exciting. Oregon State does have some weapons that have been held back by that quarterback play. At running back, clearly they have a trio of guys who are, very solid. Starts with Damian Martinez. Deshaun Fenwick is still there. Jam Griffin is still there. Damian Martinez is going to be an absolute star. Martinez was just a few under 1,000, rushed for 982 yards, 7 touchdowns, 4 receptions, not a big pass catcher there. It was kind of spread out. Deshaun Fenwick rushed for 553, and then just about 490 yards for Jam Griffin. I think we'll still see those guys get carry. See the carry share, 161 for Dame, 114 for Fenwick, and 86 for Griffin. We'll see probably 175 plus carries for Damian Martinez. If we don't, there's a real problem. YPC of 6.1 last year. He's an absolute killer. He's the only one of the 3 that played in every single game, at least. Again, not a big time pass catcher yet, but if he starts getting targets from DJ and he starts turning himself into a reliable pass catcher, his fantasy value skyrockets because it's no longer hamstrung by, hey, he's got to get 20 plus carries to pay this price off. We still have 2 touchdowns and we're off to the races. I think that's certainly a possibility for Damian Martinez, and he looks like an absolute star for Oregon State. Having a capable quarterback now is going to open things up even further for him. At wide receiver, Silas Bolden is back. Bolden, another guy they used as well. The industry propped up and made it seem like they were better than they actually were. Anthony Gould does return, 27 catches, about 460 yards, 3 touchdowns, a couple of carries in his belt. So Gould looks like a guy that could turn into a legitimate WR1, DFS option, mid-range type of player, certainly. Zachary Carr comes in as a freshman. They have Trevor Pope, Jeremiah Noga, and Jimmy Valson. As far as DFS viable guys, Gould and Bolden, I'm either going to run DJ naked if I'm using him as of right now. We've got a couple months still to change our mind, but when I look at this group, or I'm just running the Oregon State running backs, namely Damian Martinez, or like a min-price Jam Griffin GPP lineup, something like that. That's where majority of my love for this team will come from. I think they'll be an excellent defense. I think they'll be a hard-nosed team, and I think they're going to grind out games, and they're going to get a lot of offense via the running game. All right, we have 3 more teams to talk about here. Moving right along, the UCLA Bruins. Now, UCLA, they're going to be going through some major changes, but the nice thing is they are a team that went ahead and made the portal their batch, right? They did a very good job. Like when you lose a bunch of talent via graduation or hell, even to the portal, you just, in this day and age, you can't afford to sit pat and just allow things to happen and rely on freshmen coming in. Like you want to get good freshman, but we're in an era of college sports right now where you simply have to, especially football and basketball, have veterans on your team. And the only real way to replace a veteran with a veteran right now is through the transfer portal. And first time transfers right away, grad transfers right away. We're seeing second and third time transfers might be having some trouble. But there are some guys here who are going to be eligible right away, and UCLA has an offense that's going to be awesome. Once again, they do have a situation at quarterback that is nice to have. They have a freshman by the name of Dante Moore, who is one of those. This class has a ton of future stars at quarterback, and Dante Moore is certainly one of them. These quarterbacks who are coming in and are getting NIL deals out of high school. The arm strength is there. He's certainly going to be, as a freshman, in line to get snaps and maybe even get the starting gig right away. Ethan Garbers is there with DTR long gone. Garbers, who played parts of 6 games last year, completed 26 of his 37 passes, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I think he's fine. If he has to start early on, or they're not comfortable going with the freshman, he's definitely fine. They also have Colin Schley, who comes in from Kent State, that high-powered Kent State offense. He is in line to get, I think, looking at I think Schley has an upperclassman and somebody who can handle, big moments and has that experience. Throughout his time at Kent State, he was mostly a backup right behind Crum, had the unfortunate, time of coming up the same time as Crum, but got a shot last year as a starter, threw for 2,100 yards, had 13 touchdowns. As far I think we might combination of that quarterback here, UCLA at the end of the day. I don't know that one guy will keep the job from start to finish, which makes it kind of interesting. But I do think first crack goes to Colin Schley. Ethan Garber's kind of just, in that backup role where he's fine there. But Dante Moore is going to be pushing for time right away. Kid's an absolute stud. And there's, like I said, this class has a ton of intriguing quarterback prospects that we're going to be talking about as early as, realistically next year, but possibly even this year with some true freshmen. At running back, gets a little bit difficult because you're having to replace my guy, Zach Charbonnet, who I absolutely love, rushed for 1,400 yards last year, an absolute star. Returners they have with experience, Keegan Jones, who is a redshirt senior, and TJ Harden, who is a true sophomore. Looking at it, Harden rushed for 325 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. Keegan Jones rushed for 320 yards, 2 touchdowns, but also caught 21 passes, 231 yards, 3 touchdowns. So Keegan used as a pass catcher. Charbonnet also a pass catcher, 37 catches, 321 yards. But there was a lot of times where blowouts happened, right? Charbonnet saw, he was sitting on the bench a few games there the entire second half. Hurt us because we roster him, and he'd put up like 21 at halftime and then wouldn't play again at the second half. So Keegan Jones benefited from getting the second half action a lot of times. So he got to pad some of his stats, but he at least proved himself to be a capable pass catcher out of the backfield. And to me, that gives him at least some intrigue, because even if he doesn't win the job outright and get the RB1 gig, he's going to factor in. He's going to get touches. He's going to, get targets, and he's going to be fantasy relevant. And it's probably going to be really cheap as well. They also have some transfers coming in, right? Anthony Adkins, who is a triple option guy coming from Army. Somebody who can carry the load, somebody who can get tough yardage. Somebody who can score touchdowns in the red zone. So I like that. And then Carson Steele, who should probably be able to get the RB1 job ahead of the 2 returning guys coming out of Ball State. Carson Steele, of course, Maction, a ton of stats, a reliable running back, a reliable overall, blocker, which gets him plenty of snaps. stays healthy for the most part. You look at what he did his first year at Ball State, 891 yards, 6 touchdowns, 12 catches for 157 yards and a touch. The previous year, or last year, I should say, 289 carries. He went from 192 carries to 289, so a lot of mileage, but he can handle it. A 5.4 YPC, 1,600 yard touchdowns, 29 receptions, 166 yards, and a touchdown. So I do like Steele to come in as like not a carbon copy directly of Zach Charbonnet, but definitely a guy who can operate in that role, can get catches, can block, can get heavy carries like a Charbonnet. I think we see him go right into that spot, and then you see Keegan Jones kind of maintain that. Maybe it turns into a 1A 1B situation. Harden will get looks. Adkins, I think, will kind of operate fullback and get some red zone carries, stuff like that. But overall, this UCLA running game is pretty savage. And I do think, despite what some of the stuff I'm reading about it being split, I do think Carson Steele ends up getting a bulk of the carries. At wide receiver, they have returners such as Cam Brown and Jaden Marshall. But they bring in J. Michael Sturdivant from Cal, who turned himself into an absolute star. They're, despite the fact that, again, Cal just offensively, they were stagnant. They weren't winning games, but there wasn't a time from weeks. Let me pull it up here. I can't even. It was like weeks 7 through 9, maybe. Let's see. Touch. Week 10, he was 4 for 45, but followed that up with a 5 for 70 and a touchdown against UCLA, 5 for 70 against Stanford. And he was priced pretty fair, or even maybe a tad underpriced, certainly in that week 7, 8, 9, where he was just chalk all the time because of how cheap he was. And the entire industry, myself included, just continued to play him because of how consistent he was from a PPR standpoint. I mean, from weeks 5 through 9, he had 6+ catches, regardless of the yardage, regardless if he scored a touchdown. He was just PPR gold, and he continued to be priced at $5K, $5.2, $5.5. So he's going to obviously take a huge role in this offense. I think he should be clear-cut WR1, slide in and be that Jake Bobo for them. We saw Bobo stepped up, 57 catches, 800 yards, 7 touchdowns coming over from Duke. Casimir Allen, Cam Brown, those guys were productive, but the true WR1 is how this offense operates and when they're at their best. So look for J. Michael Sturdivant to be that guy. The other notables here, another transfer, another intra-conference transfer. Kind of, as a guy who loves the transfer portal, I kind of am annoyed by the intra-conference transfers. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but it does. But Kyle Ford transferring from USC over to UCLA will be there, will factor in. Probably a WR3. We at least want to know name-wise if he's cheap, if he's, if he ends up starting and he's like 3.5, something like that. The past 2 seasons, 250+ yards, 2 touchdowns each of those seasons, and at least 19 catches. So a certifiable, solid, secondary receiver option that has a little bit of pop. Averaged almost 20 yards per catch a season ago. All right, now we get to the Washington State Cougars, a team that, man, I don't dislike as much as Oregon, but I don't like them. I don't like them at all. So where my dislike for Oregon could maybe even be referred to as hate, it's a strong word. It is, but it's true. The Cougars are a team that I don't like. And a lot of people, when they have a team in their state or in their conference, it's like, hey, my team's out. I'm going to root for, this Pac-12 team or I'm going to root for this team in the state. I'm the opposite. I've talked about this a little bit before, but I want to see the other teams in the state that I don't support, such as Washington State, I want to see them lose every game. I want to see, if the Huskies aren't going to make the playoff and maybe USC does, I want to see USC get beaten by 100 to Alabama. Like, I'm that guy that's hating on his conference teammates, and it is conference mates, and I've always been that way. So I don't want to see this team perform well at all. Looking at the offense, Cam Ward's back. That's a Jake guy. I've never really been a Cam Ward guy throughout last season. I know, the talk of him was just going to come in and be an amazing play. And you know what? I got to give it to him. He was poised. I was a little worried about him because of his lack of running ability. I thought playing up, the upper tier competition was really going to hurt him. But he did throw 23 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, threw for over 3,200 yards, completion rate about 65%. He was solid. He rushed, the rushing wasn't there, which we knew, but he did rush for 5 touchdowns. Yardage-wise, he was under 100. He was a little bit of a statue in that regard, which we talked about coming into the season. But he did score touchdowns in the red zone, and he called his own number, and he did fine. So I think Cameron Ward is a usable option, especially if DK is going to be disrespecting and pricing him at like $5K, $6K. It almost kind of forces your hand because you know what to expect from him at this point. Running backs, you do return Jalen Jenkins and Nakia Watson, both of those guys. Watson rushed for almost 800 yards last year, 9 touchdowns. Jenkins, 400 yards touchdown. So they get their 2 primary returners back there. Those guys will probably uprate the similar to last season, which was about a 70-30, type of situation. Wide receiver is where it gets different. They do run that 4 wide at times. So Lincoln Victor is back. That's pretty much the only receiver that had any continuity from the prior guy. Looking at the rest of it, Deshaun Stribling, who had 602 yards, he's gone. Robert Farrell, 582 yards, he's gone. Donovan Ollie, 491 yards, he's gone. And Renard Bell, 310 yards, he's gone. Lincoln Victor, 26 catches for 245 yards. He will have to step into a much bigger role, but they have other options that they've brought in. Oh, and also Leighton Smithson is returning, and I do like Leighton Smithson. He had 30 catches for 235 yards and a touchdown. There were times last year where he looked like the best receiver on the field. He couldn't put it together consistently, but I am intrigued to see what he might bring to the table here in this upcoming season. Now, transfer-wise, 75 to 85% of your receiving total is not an easy thing to do. They go over to San Jose State. They get Isaiah Hamilton, who is certainly a reasonable pass-catching option, out of the Mountain West, somebody who definitely can produce at a high level. Had his moments. Again, consistency issues for Isaiah Hamilton, most definitely, but he was a guy that I found myself using on those late-night slates. Now, you look at the year he had in 2019 where he blew up, 43 catches, 700 yards, 4 touchdowns. Now, he never really was able to build up on that. And San Jose State had kind of a revolving door. Jermaine Braddock was there, a couple of others. But you saw in 2020, he dropped to 13 catches, 206 yards, 2 touchdowns. Back up to 31 catches in 2021, 414 yards, and then down to 11 catches for 228 yards. So consistency issues there. Gets a bit of a fresh start to end his collegiate career here for Washington State as a grad transfer. Certainly like him and think he will perform this offensive guys. His kind of breakout season. A lot of people are not going to remember that part of him. Kyle Williams transfers in from UNLV. Good opportunity to be a WR1 for him. Fresno State's Josh Kelly is transferring in. I think he has an opportunity to be a big-time weapon in this offense. And then a JUCO transfer by the name of D.T. Sheffield coming in. So some weapons are at the disposal here. I like Kyle Williams probably more than Isaiah Hamilton as well. I think it's going to take some time for us to see how the pecking order develops. A lot of these guys are similar in talent level and similar in skill set. So I'm going to have to see, the rapport built with Ward and who he kind of zones in on. Kyle Williams, definitely a guy to pay attention to. 430 plus yards in each of his 3 collegiate seasons. Last year, 541 yards, 40 catches, 5 touchdowns. A year prior, 601 yards, 42 catches, and 2 touchdowns. Again, another capable option that can do some damage here in this offense. They're making themselves deep, so it might be a similar situation to where, just like last year, nobody is, knocking the out of the park with like a 900 to 1,000-yard season. But there's a bunch of guys here who I could see with 500 to 600 yards, 4 to 5 touchdowns, and legitimately paying off, on a week-to-week basis, as long as they're not priced ridiculous. If any of these guys are priced at like 8K plus, it's obviously a no-fly zone. But 4K, 5K, we're talking about guys that we can certainly use. I like Josh Kelly a lot during his time at Fresno State. He was always cheap, value play. In 2021, 52 catches, 800 yards. Wasn't able to build on that. 12 catches for 207 yards last year only. Just couldn't get going, didn't build the rapport that he had the year prior, and there were too many guys above him getting playing time and demanding targets. All right, and that leads us to our final team, the Arizona Wildcats. Pull up the projected depth chart that I have here, at least that I think it's going to be. Obviously, things will change as we go through camp and practices. Injuries happen. All right, so the Arizona offense, Jaden DeLora back, obviously a solid option there. Did his thing at WSU, had positive moments at Arizona. He's not a guy that I think I'm going to end up using very often. I didn't last year either. He was a guy that for me was kind of a take it or leave it, even at a 6'5", or ton of offense just didn't move the needle for me enough. Their pass catchers were good, and DeLora showed flashes, but there was just a lot of inconsistencies there for me, and I didn't find myself being punished by fading him. Now, he did throw for 3,700 yards. He had 25 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, completed about 63% of his passes. Definitely a guy that I think could build on that and absolutely should, and did punch in 4 rushing touchdowns as well, but 120 yards on the ground. Not the biggest yardage for a guy that, sometimes has a reputation for being a dual threat when maybe it's not merited, or rather there's not merit to it. Merited. Must be time for me to go to bed. So I don't mind him at quarterback. There's obviously continuity there. They do have Michael Wiley back at running back, DJ Williams coming back. They have a little bit of continuity there with their RB3 as well, and Jonah Coleman. So you have a lot of yardage, over 1,300 yards of on the ground coming back. Wiley rushed for 771 yards, 8 scores. DJ Williams rushed for 376 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then Jonah Coleman, 372 yards, 4 touchdowns. And I feel like probably very few people even saw Jonah Coleman play football last year to know that he was pretty solid in that RB3 role. And at times he was getting early game carries and touchdown equity in important games, or games that they were in early on. So the running game's solid. The pass catchers for Arizona, obviously, losing Dorian Singer, that's tough. Jacob Cowing is back. Jacob Cowing is one of the best receivers in all of PPR when it comes to PPR. Especially during the days that you have, and he proved it again when he went to Arizona. Always going to be a top-tier DFS option that's really, priced as one of the secondary options, despite the fact that he absolutely can break slate. Tetroya McMillan, also the sneak play. That was a Jake play last year a lot. McMillan showed flashes. Now he will get his opportunity with Dorian Singer gone. So you're looking at it, Singer 1,100 yards, Jacob Cowing over 1,000 yards. You take that 1,100 yards out. McMillan was third on the team in yardage at 702 receiving yards, 39 catches, had the highest average at 18 yards per catch above Cowing, who was at 12.2. Again, the PPR god, and Dorian Singer was 16.7. McMillan did lead the team in receiving touchdowns with 8, Cowing 7, Singer 6. McMillan had that touchdown equity. He had that instant rapport with Delora, and he's going to have the opportunity to be the second option now behind Cowing, and it'll be a deep threat. Cowing's still going to be absorbing that PPR role, that's and doing a lot of slot stuff, but McMillan's going to be able to break defenses' hearts, and he's going to be able to break some big plays. They do bring in the transfer Montana Lamone from Colorado. Colorado loses their top two receivers, I should say, with Tyson and Lamonius Craig taking off. He is going to highly doubt he'll be. Cowing's not getting unseated. And I don't think he's better than McMillan either. I think Lamonius Craig has ability, and he showed at times, when he wasn't banged up, that he could be one of the better options and reliable pass catcher, somebody with solid hands, and somebody who I think could turn himself into a bona fide, third option on a team that has good weapons. You look at it, 23 catches, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, nothing that's going to jump off the page, but you have to really think about how bad that quarterback play was for Colorado. And this offense for Arizona, it was able to support, 3 700-plus yard receivers. No reason to think that they can't. Cowing will have his 1,000 yards again. I think McMillan will end up with 1,000 yards. And Lamonius Craig, as long as he can stay healthy and block and doesn't get unseated by one of these freshmen coming in, should end up having 600-plus yards himself. And he'll likely be a cheaper option as well. So I'm on it. I'm good with it. I like this receiving room for Arizona. I think that they're a team that is just kind of okay for me from a DFS standpoint, but they're going to be on those late night slates, and I'm absolutely going to be wanting 100% Jacob Cowing on those slates. And depending on how sneaky they are with the pricing of T-Man, I'll be close to all in on him on some of these late night slates as well. So the Pac-12 loaded it at the receiver spot, has some deadly tight ends, a lot of timeshare running back situations, but not 50-50 timeshares, more like 60-40, 70-30, and so on. And I think strong quarterback play, deceptively strong quarterback play, and the fact that a ton of these new offensive coordinators coming in from other places are going to infuse a ton of new life into these otherwise previously stagnant offenses. And we're going to see a situation where whenever Pac-12 teams are on the slate, you're going to have to really seriously consider stacking a lot of your lineup with Pac-12 guys or risk getting buried by the rest of the field. All right, so that will do it. We finish up here the first CFB preview of the season, Pac-12. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I appreciate those of you who hung out with me live or watch on demand. Make sure you slap that like button. If you're watching on demand, make sure you drop a comment as well. It really helps the show be seen within that YouTube algorithm. I know everybody that does YouTube videos, give me a like, give me a comment, subscribe. You know the drill. But honestly, with what we're doing at FTN and what we're trying to accomplish, it really does help us. So I appreciate it. I'll be back next week, same time, Wednesday evening, right around 9 p.m. PST, midnight EST live, if it's your fancy, breaking down another conference. We're going to be doing the Big Ten, so if you're a Big Ten truther and fan, you don't want to miss next week. Team by team conference breakdown. Thanks very much, guys, for your continued support, and we'll see you next week.